Amidst the lush, sun-dappled woods of the Oregon wilderness, 24-year-old Finn, a part-time forest ranger and aspiring wildlife photographer, wandered through the dense forest trails. His camera hung around his neck, always ready to capture the wonders of the wild, a passion nurtured since childhood, inspired by his late father's love for nature. Finn had taken a break from his urban life, seeking solace in the quiet of the forest after a particularly grueling year. The isolation of the wilderness was his therapy, a reprieve from the noise and complexity of the outside world. On a misty morning, while exploring a lesser-known trail, a sound caught his attention. A high-pitched, trembling bleat that echoed through the trees. Curiosity piqued, he followed the sound to its source, eventually spotting a small, trembling shape caught between the twisted roots of an ancient oak. It was a fawn, its legs tangled in a snare, eyes wide with terror. The sight wrenched at Finn's heart. Carefully, he approached, speaking in a low, soothing tone. The fawn's panicked breathing slowed, its gaze locking onto Finn's. Gently, he worked to untangle the fawn's fragile legs, his fingers steady yet tender. The moment the fawn was freed, it staggered, unsure, before collapsing back to the ground. Finn knew he couldn't leave the fawn there, vulnerable and weak. Lifting the delicate creature into his arms, he carried it back to his cabin. There, in the warmth of the rustic shelter, he tended to its shallow cuts and bruises, offering water and comforting whispers. The fawn's presence filled the quiet of the cabin, a reminder that even in solitude, connections could form in the most unexpected ways. Throughout the following days, Finn cared for the fawn, creating a safe space within the cabin. He placed a soft, worn blanket near the fireplace, where the fawn rested, its small body curled like a crescent moon. Each morning, Finn ventured out, foraging for fresh leaves, berries, and tender grass. He researched the dietary needs of deer, ensuring the fawn received adequate nourishment. The fawn, timid yet curious, began to trust Finn, its large dark eyes watching his every movement. Finn found himself speaking to the fawn, his voice gentle, sharing stories of his childhood, his father's tales of wildlife, and his dreams of photographing the elusive creatures of the forest. The fawn, though silent, seemed to listen, its gaze softening as the days passed. Finn named the fawn Willow, a tribute to the ancient oak where he had found her. Willow's legs slowly regained strength, her steps becoming steadier. Yet, Finn knew that each step closer to recovery was a step closer to letting go. The cabin had become a sanctuary, a place of healing, but it was not where Willow belonged. The bond between Finn and Willow grew quietly, an unspoken understanding born from compassion and trust. On quiet evenings, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the forest whispered with the sounds of dusk, Finn would sit by the fireplace, Willow resting beside him. The warmth of the fire reflected in the fawn's eyes, mirroring the flicker of connection they had forged. Yet the wilderness beyond the cabin's walls called to Willow. Her ears perked at the distant sounds of the forest, the rustling leaves, the calls of birds, the scent of earth carried by the wind. Finn saw it in her gaze, the pull toward the untamed, the instinct to roam free. As spring gradually awakened the forest from its winter slumber, Finn knew that the time to part ways with Willow was drawing near. The thought ached, a bittersweet realization that love sometimes meant letting go. Finn's heart wrestled with the fear of what awaited Willow beyond the safety of the cabin, yet he knew that the wild was where she belonged. On the morning of their parting, Finn led Willow to the edge of the forest, his heart heavy yet resolute. He knelt beside her, his hand resting gently on her delicate frame. For a moment, Willow looked back at him, her gaze lingering. A silent thank you, a farewell suspended in time. Then, with a quiet grace, she stepped into the forest, her form blending with the shadows of the trees. Finn watched until she disappeared, the forest reclaiming what was its own. The silence that followed was both hollow and hopeful, a testament to the bond they had shared and the inevitability of letting go. That evening, as the sun set and the forest hummed with life, Finn sat alone by the fireplace, the space beside him empty yet filled with the echoes of a memory. The connection he had forged with Willow was a reminder that the wilderness, in all its vastness, held moments of profound connection, brief, beautiful, and unforgettable, healing hands and hesitant steps. Over the following days, the fawn began to regain its strength. Finn observed the fawn closely, documenting its behavior and condition in a notebook. He affectionately named it Whisper, for its cautious, almost ghostly movements around the cabin. Whisper's instincts were evident. The fawn remained wary, its large, glassy eyes tracking Finn's every step. Yet, gradually, a fragile trust began to build. Finn would sit near the fawn, sketching or quietly reading, creating an unspoken companionship. He fed it leaves and berries, mimicking what it might consume in the wild, ensuring not to overstep the delicate boundary between helper and captor. As Whisper's legs strengthened, Finn noticed its growing curiosity. The fawn began exploring the edges of the cabin, pressing its delicate nose against the windows, gazing out at the endless expanse of forest. It was a silent reminder of what Finn had always known, that Whisper belonged to the wilderness, not the four walls of his cabin. On one rainy afternoon, as Finn sat by the window, sketching the blurred outlines of trees swaying in the wind, Whisper approached him. Tentatively, the fawn rested its head on his knee, the weight of its trust as fragile as it was profound. Finn's heart ached with the realization that this bond, though beautiful, could not last. He knew he had to prepare for the day Whisper would return to the forest. To ease that transition, Finn began taking the fawn outside more often, allowing it to familiarize itself with the scents and sounds of the wild. Each step felt like a countdown, a bittersweet reminder of the inevitable farewell. Every morning, Finn led Whisper to the edge of the clearing behind the cabin. There, in the dappled sunlight, he would watch the fawn step cautiously through the undergrowth, its ears twitching at the calls of birds and the rustle of leaves. Whisper's fear seemed to lessen, curiosity blooming in its place. Finn stayed close yet allowed the fawn to wander, a guardian's watchful distance. During these outings, Finn began to notice signs of other deer. Tracks in the soft earth, scat scattered near shrubs, the faint scent of musk in the air. He wondered if Whisper sensed them too, the pull of its own kind calling from beyond the trees. Sometimes the fawn would lift its head abruptly, staring into the forest with a stillness that suggested recognition. In those moments, Finn's heart clenched, knowing the call of the wild was becoming louder. Nights were quieter now. Whisper no longer startled at every creak of the cabin or flicker of shadow. It slept near the hearth, its slender legs folded beneath its body, its breathing soft and steady. Finn found himself watching over the fawn, his sketches and notes filling with details of its transformation from the frightened, injured creature he had first found to the resilient, curious spirit it was now. Their bond was tested one afternoon when a sudden clap of thunder startled Whisper. The fawn bolted toward the door, its instincts awakened in a flash of panic. Finn's heart raced as he reached out, his voice calm yet urgent. Whisper hesitated at the threshold, its body tense, torn between the safety of the cabin and the call of the wild storm. After a moment, it stepped back, its breathing rapid but steadying. Finn realized then that the fawn was not his to keep, that each day spent together was a gift borrowed from the forest itself. The forest was Whisper's home, And no matter the warmth of the cabin or the gentleness of Finn's care, the wild would reclaim what was its own. With a heavy heart, Finn began preparing for the day Whisper would leave. He gathered the last of the herbs he had used to treat the fawn's wounds, setting them near the edge of the forest. He stopped feeding it by hand, encouraging Whisper to graze on the tender shoots and leaves that lined the forest's edge. Each step was a deliberate choice to empower Whisper, to let the wild seep back into its spirit. One morning, Finn woke to find the cabin emptier than usual. Whisper's place near the hearth was vacant, the air still and heavy. Finn stepped outside, his eyes scanning the forest's edge. There, just beyond the clearing, stood Whisper, poised and graceful. The fawn looked back once, a moment of recognition, of silent gratitude, before vanishing into the green shadows of the forest. Finn's heart swelled with both sorrow and satisfaction. The forest had taken back its own, and he was left standing on the threshold of his cabin, a witness to the delicate, fleeting bond formed between a man and a creature of the wild. Whisper's departure was not an end, but a continuation, a return to the untamed, where it truly belonged. Spring arrived in full bloom, painting the forest in shades of green and gold. The sun warmed the earth, and new life stirred in every corner of the woods. Whisper, now fully healed and agile, often leaped gracefully around the clearing near the cabin. The fawn's confidence had blossomed, its once timid spirit replaced by a lively curiosity. Finn knew the time had come. Keeping Whisper confined any longer would be a selfish attempt to cling to a connection that had always been destined to end. On a bright morning, he guided Whisper to the edge of the clearing, where the forest loomed, deep and endless. The fawn hesitated, its ears twitching, gaze flicking between Finn and the beckoning wild. Finn knelt down, his hand gently brushing the soft fur of Whisper's head. "This is where you belong," he whispered, his voice barely audible. The fawn blinked, a moment of understanding passing between them, a silent farewell. Slowly, Whisper took a few tentative steps forward, glancing back once before vanishing into the dense underbrush. The forest swallowed the fawn whole, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. That evening, as Finn sat alone by the cabin window, his heart a mixture of pride and sorrow, a distant rustling caught his ear. For a brief, flickering moment he saw a familiar shape. A slender, graceful silhouette standing at the forest's edge, gazing back toward the cabin. Then, just as quickly it disappeared. The days that followed felt quieter. The absence of Whisper's soft footfalls and curious glances left a void, a quiet echo that resonated in Finn's heart. He continued his duties as a forest ranger, his camera capturing the wild's untamed beauty. But there was a new layer to his understanding. Each animal he encountered, the wary fox, the soaring hawk, the rustling rabbits, reminded him of the bond he had shared with Whisper. The connection to the wild had always been present, but it now pulsed deeper, intertwined with a sense of guardianship. In moments of solitude, Finn found himself searching the woods for a glimpse of Whisper. Sometimes he thought he saw a flash of movement between the trees, a brief reminder of the fawn's graceful presence. Other times, he caught sight of deer tracks near the cabin, fresh imprints in the soft earth, evidence that Whisper might still linger near, a guardian spirit of the woods. Months passed, and the forest shifted with the seasons. Summer's lush abundance faded to autumn's golden hues, and the air grew crisp. Finn's time in the wilderness was coming to an end, as his responsibilities called him back to the structured rhythm of urban life. The cabin that had once been a refuge now felt like a cherished memory, a chapter of growth and discovery. On his last morning in the cabin, Finn stepped outside, his breath visible in the cool air. He looked toward the forest, the trees a blend of bare branches and evergreens. The weight of leaving felt heavy, yet balanced by the knowledge that his bond with the wild, with Whisper, would remain a part of him. As he turned to leave, a rustle drew his attention. There, at the forest's edge, stood a deer. Older, stronger, its coat sleek and healthy. Finn's heart leaped, recognizing the familiar, cautious gaze. Whisper had grown, flourished, become a part of the wild in every way. Their eyes met, a final, unspoken acknowledgement of the bond they had shared. Finn's lips curled into a gentle smile, a farewell that needed no words. Whisper lingered for a moment before retreating into the woods, disappearing into the vastness of the wild. Finn knew the forest would carry their story, a memory woven into its shadows and sunlit glades. With a heart full of gratitude, Finn returned to the cabin, gathering his belongings and locking the door for the last time. As he walked away, the forest stood tall and timeless behind him, a guardian of secrets, of bonds forged and released. Finn's steps were steady, his spirit grounded by the understanding that the wild had not just been a refuge but a teacher, a companion, a part of him that he would carry forever.